I hadn't planned on coming home at all, but when the company folded and Aaron dumped me within the same week, there weren't many choices left. My savings were thin, New York rent was unforgiving, and pride didn't make a good mattress. So, with a duffel bag and a worn-out laptop, I took a bus back to the house I grew up in. A quiet, faded colonial on a street that hadn't changed since high school. Mom met me at the door with a hug that lasted too long. Dad stayed seated in the recliner, TV blaring, barely lifting his hand to acknowledge me. Just until you find your feet, Mom said, brushing my hair behind my ear like I was still 13. Stay as long as you need. Your old room's waiting. I smiled, grateful but uneasy. I hadn't been in that room for almost 8 years. It was still painted a soft lilac with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, my own personal galaxy. I'd expected dust, disuse. What I didn't expect were the boxes stacked in the corner. Madison's things. Baby toys, diapers, a folded-up stroller leaning against my bookshelf. Don't worry, Mom said when I asked. That's just storage. We didn't have space elsewhere. I didn't argue. I was tired, emotionally wrung out and still hearing Aaron's voice in my head saying, "You're not the kind of woman I see a future with." The first week passed quietly. I updated my portfolio, sent out resumes, applied to freelance gigs. I tried to ignore the low hum of being an adult child back in her childhood bed, overhearing phone calls I wasn't part of, decisions made. Without my name attached then, Madison showed up 6 months pregnant and glowing, or so everyone said. She barged in one afternoon without warning, laughing and rubbing her belly. And the house shifted like it had been waiting for her. My parents lit up, voices higher, energy warmer. Dad made her tea. Mom brought out fresh towels. The guest room was too small, they said. Too stuffy for a pregnant woman. I watched her set her suitcase in the hallway and drop onto the couch like she owned it. She didn't even say hi that night. I found some of my clothes had been moved from my room to a laundry basket in the garage the next morning. My laptop had been unplugged to make room for Madison's pregnancy pillow. A baby monitor sat where my sketchpad had been. My framed college degree, a moment I'd worked tooth and nail for, was now shoved behind her diaper. Boggy tried to tell myself it was fine.
Temporary. They said it was temporary, I whispered to myself, like an affirmation a few days later.
At breakfast, Mom stirred her coffee and said it like she was commenting on the weather. "Oh, honey, we'll need your room soon, just until the baby settles." I blinked. What? You know how Madison needs space, and it'll be hard for her to go up and down the stairs with the baby. The nursery will be in your room, just for a little while. I looked over at Madison. She didn't meet my eyes. Just kept scrolling on her phone, but where would I sleep? The garage for now. We'll make it nice. Your dad bought a new space heater. That night, I moved my mattress into the garage. It smelled faintly of gasoline and mildew, and the heater clicked every few minutes like it was trying to stay alive. I wrapped myself in old blankets and stared at the exposed beams in the ceiling. My fingers were numb by morning. No one asked how I slept. I spent the next week pretending it didn't bother. May smiled during family dinner. Even when my chair was pushed to the edge of the table, I offered to help with Madison's prenatal vitamins and ultrasound appointments. Even though she barely acknowledged May, played the grateful daughter, the just happy to be here woman, because I didn't want to seem ungrateful, but the ache inside me grew louder with each passing day, the ache of being invisible, of being erased, of being temporary. One evening, I went back upstairs when no one was home. My room, my sanctuary. My childhood had been fully transformed. The crib stood where my desk used to be. My posters were gone. My bookshelf had been replaced by a mobile of plastic. Star's eyes stood in the doorway, unsure whether to cry or laugh. Then I whispered aloud, "You really gave it away." No one heard me, but something inside me did. The mattress on the garage floor was uneven. The springs made my back ache, and the cement underneath stayed cold no matter how many blankets I stacked. I taped up one of the small square windows with old construction paper to block the early morning light. The single extension cord ran from the hallway, powering both the buzzing box heater and my phone charger. I'd tuck the heater beside me at night like a pet, It sputtered and clicked but gave just enough warmth to pretend. I belonged here. No one came in. No one asked how I was sleeping. It was as if I'd become another box in storage. The morning of Madison's baby shower, I tiptoed into the kitchen early, trying not to be seen. My mother had turned the house into a Pinterest dream. Pastel banners, silver balloons that spelled "Oh baby," little cupcakes with tiny rattles on top. Opened the fridge, hoping to grab a yogurt, but everything was labeled, "Don't eat." For shower. Even the orange juice I settled for a bruised banana. I wasn't invited to the partyo. They never said that outright. But no one asked what I'd be wearing. No one told me the schedule. When I offered to help decorate, Mom smiled distractedly and handed me a broom, so I cleaned while Madison's friends arrived in designer coats and perfect makeup, exclaiming loudly about what a saint Ava is, giving up her room. I stood by the hallway, invisible, holding a trash bag. Later that evening, I sat on a stool in the garage, eating leftover pasta off a paper plate. Someone had scraped the top layer of cheese off, but I told myself it still tasted fine through the half-opened door. I could hear laughter in the living room, champagne flutes clinking, Madison's voice carrying louder than the rest, then Dad's voice, gruff, tired. "You're almost 30, Ava. It's time to be useful, not sensitive." The words hit me like a slap. I looked down at my hands, at the faint paint stains on my fingers from years of designing, creating. I was useful. Just not to them. That night, I found my high school yearbook buried in an old storage bin. Flipping through it, I paused at the senior quote, "Beneath my name, make space where there is none. Fill it with something better." I stared at the words for a long time. I didn't feel like that girl anymore. A few days later, my friend Tasha stopped by. She was in town for a design conference and insisted on catching up. I didn't want her to come, not like this, but I couldn't say no when she arrived. I met her outside, steering her quickly past the house and toward the garage. The second she stepped in, she froze. "This is where you're staying." I laughed, a brittle sound. "It's not as bad at night." She didn't laugh. Instead, she looked at the small heater, the folding chair, the mattress shoved against paint cans, and said softly, "Ava, this isn't okay." I shrugged. "It's temporary." They needed the space for the baby. She didn't reply right away. She just looked at me, really looked, in a way no one else had in weeks. "You don't have to make yourself smaller to be loved." She said. Something cracked inside me, just a little. That evening, I passed the open living room on my way to use the bathroom. Madison was showing off her sonogram photos. Everyone cooed and asked questions. Then she laughed and said, "It's not like Ava was using the room for anything important." A wave of heat surged up my spine. I kept walking. I shut the bathroom door behind me and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked tired, washed out. Not bitter, not yet, but worn down to the bone. In the garage, I sat with my sketch pad and tried to draw. My fingers trembled from the cold, and nothing on the page made sense. Flipped to a blank sheet and wrote one sentence: "When they shrink you, take up more space somewhere else." I underlined it twice. Then I tucked it under my pillow, lay back, and closed my eyes. Even through the layers of blankets, the cold from the cement seeped into my bones. The heater sputtered again, a tired, wheezing sound, and somewhere deep in my chest, I finally admitted it to myself: I didn't belong here anymore. There are things you forget when you've spent enough time pretending they didn't matter, like how many nights you stayed up with spreadsheets and calculators trying to keep the house from slipping away, or how your parents once trusted you so completely that they handed you the bills because you were better at numbers and good with computers. They never said thank you. But they also never missed a payment. It was 2 winters ago when Dad was laid off from the shipping yard. Mom picked up extra shifts at the diner, coming home with sore feet and faded eyes. Madison had just moved into an apartment with her boyfriend, still posting aesthetic lattes on Instagram. And me, I was the one quietly juggling everything. The mortgage had ballooned after an interest rate spike. My parents were panicking. I researched options late into the night and found a program that offered refinancing with a better rate. But it required a strong credit score. Neither of them qualified, so I applied. I still remember sitting in the banker's office. A woman named Carla with kind eyes and a serious tone. You understand what this means, right? She said, we'll have to shift the deed into your name for the refinance. Technically, the house will be yours. I nodded. It's for my family, Carla hesitated. You're generous. But make sure they remember that. They didn't within a few weeks, the refinance was approved. The payments dropped by $460 a month. The house was saved and Ava, quiet, dependable Ava, was on the title. In the chaos of job changes and Madison's drama, it got buried. Everyone moved on like it had never happened, so did it. Until that night in the garage I was digging through one of the old storage bins, looking for my tax documents, my freelance. Work required me to track everything. Even though my income now was almost nothing, the bin was dusty and half-crushed under an old air mattress. I pulled out folders one by one until I saw a manila envelope with my handwriting 2021 mortgage. Refi documents. Ava's copy. My breath caught in my throat. I opened it slowly. Carefully inside were the original closing documents. Signatures. Bank seals, notarized pages there, plain as day, was the updated deed ownership. Ava L. Michelai stared at it. For a long time, I wasn't sure what I felt, not anger. Not yet, but something deeper. Something quietly awake all this time. I'd been treated like a guest in a place I had saved. Like I didn't belong. Like I was cluttered to be moved when the baby needed more space, and yet in black and white. On official paper, the house was mine. I laid the paperwork on my lap and sat cross-legged on the cold garage floor. The heater clicked on behind me. A soft hum filling the silence. I remembered Carla's words. Make sure they remember. They hadn't, but I had. The next morning, I didn't say a word to anyone. I made coffee. Just like usual, Madison was in the living room, legs propped on the coffee table, humming to herself while scrolling through her phone. Mom was folding baby clothes and sighing happily. I walked right past them, invisible, and went back to the garage, but I brought the folder with me, tucked it into my sketch portfolio. Beneath my most detailed designs, like it was art, and maybe it was not just proof, but power, a signature that meant I didn't just belong, I owned it. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I traced the outline of the light fixture with my eyes, breathing slow and steady, no rage. No explosion, just clarity. A plan didn't need fireworks, just a signature and a reason. I already had both. Power doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes in the form of a manila envelope tucked quietly into a sketch portfolio. Sometimes it comes with a bookmarked tab on a real estate website at 2 a.m. while the rest of the house sleeps under layers of self-righteous comfort. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Why would I? They'd already made it clear I didn't need to be included in conversations about the house, unless it involved me moving out of the wavy. Morning after I rediscovered the deed, I brewed coffee and sat at the small folding table in the garage. My laptop screen glowed softly in the dim light. I typed slowly at first, testing the waters, how to sell a house with family inside. Can you list a property you technically own? Legal options when you're the deed holder. Answer: yes, yes, and yes. I reached out to a local agent, Melanie Porter, under the guise of inquiring about options. She emailed back quickly, and we set up a phone call that same evening. I told her the truth in clipped, careful sentences. I'm the legal owner. No one else knows that. Melanie paused, then said, I assume you have a reason. I have about 6 years of reasons, I replied. Over the next few nights, I began packing the things that mattered, not in boxes. Not yet, that would be too obvious. I used storage bins, the kind you could mistake for clutter. My sketchbooks, my hard drives, my passport, every document with my name on ID. Digitized financial records and tucked the originals into a waterproof sleeve. I calculated equity using Melanie's tools. After 2 refinances and steady property appreciation, the number shocked me. It was more than I'd thought, more than enough still. I waited for a moment. For a reason it came, as expected. On a Wednesday afternoon, I'd come inside to get my laundry. Yes, still doing my own laundry. Even while sleeping beside paint cans, and heard Madison's voice down the hall. She needs to get her junk out already, she was saying. The baby deserves a real space, not leftover art projects, Mom replied. She come around once she realizes how important this is. I walked toward the hallway, half hoping someone would stop when they saw me. No one did. Later that evening, I passed by my old room, or what used to be mine. The door was open inside. I found the walls half painted in a pale lemon yellow. A can of pastel wallpaper sat beside the dresser. My art supplies, graphite pencils, charcoal, a full watercolor kit, were dumped in a bin by the closet, some of them broken. Waterlogged. My easel was gone. I didn't even ask where. I just stood there silently, as Madison chatted loudly on the phone behind me. Planning curtain rods, wall decals, rocking chairs. I stared at the yellow paint. My childhood walls, covered in memories, sketches, posters, erased like they were never there. And I thought, with crystal clarity, the baby deserves a better house, not this one. That night, I called Melanie again. List it, I said. Her voice on the other end didn't waver. I'll draw up the paperwork. You'll need to sign in person. I did. The next afternoon, at a quiet cafe 2 blocks away, she handed me the paperwork in a black folder. The ink smelled fresh. My signature looked more confident than I felt. It'll be discreet, Melanie said. No signs. No open houses. Unless you approve, only when they're out, I said. She nodded.
Understood.
The listing went live 2 days later. Photos taken during one of their rare weekends away. Staged, quiet, warm with natural light. Melanie called the house a charming suburban 3-bedroom with flexible living space and untapped potential. The irony wasn't lost on me. Offers rolled in quickly. The market was hot, and buyers liked the area. Melanie filtered them down to the serious ones. I've got a couple ready to close fast, she said. Good, I replied. Let's move. In the garage, I packed faster, tighter, cleaner. My parents didn't notice. Madison certainly didn't. She was busy posting nursery inspiration boards and debating the perfect. Now I smiled to myself as I sealed the final bin. They had no idea what was coming, but I did, and for once, that was enough. The first open house happened on a Saturday morning. While the family was out shopping for Madison's baby swing, they thought I was airing the place out. I even bought a few scented candles from the dollar store and placed them strategically, lavender in the living room, linen breeze in the hallway. When Mom asked why the house smelled so fresh lately, I smiled and said, just wanted it to feel clean again. She nodded approvingly and told me to keep it up. Melanie arrived 10 minutes after they left. She was dressed in dark jeans and a cream blouse, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning everything like a general surveying a battlefield. You're sure about this? She asked, stepping over a pile of Madison's decorative pillows. Yes, I said. They're gone until 2. She looked at me for a long second, her voice lower. Ava, does your family seriously still not know? I looked around the room, my room, technically, though no one would have guessed any more, and answered, they gave me the garage. I don't owe them announcements. Melanie didn't press further. She walked through the house like a professional and greeted the first buyers with a warm, practiced smile. It happened again the following weekend. And the next. Each time, the house filled with quiet footsteps, whispered comments, and the scent of freshly baked cookies. Melanie brought in a plastic container. None of the visitors ever knew the family still lived there. And none of the family knew strangers had walked through their home, inspecting cabinets and counting bedrooms. A few noticed the nursery in progress. Woman asked, will the baby be staying? Melanie simply smiled and said, the home will be delivered vacant. The offers came quickly. 5 by the end of the second week. Melanie handled the negotiations while I kept my head down, nodding politely at dinner and folding baby clothes with Mom while my phone buzzed quietly in my hoodie pocket. The accepted offer came from a retired couple, Anne and Frank, who wanted to downsize after their kids moved across the country. They loved the neighborhood. They loved the backyard. They wanted to move in immediately. Melanie looked at me across the table at the cafe where we'd first met. They're serious, she said. If you're ready, we can close in 10 days. I smiled. Tell them welcome home. The next step was moving my things out. I kept it simple. Early mornings, quiet nights. Bins carried one at a time to my car. No one asked questions. Why would they? I was just the extra girl in the garage, not worth noticing. On the last night, I pulled my sketch pad out from under my pillow. The page I'd written weeks ago still sat there, slightly crinkled when they shrink you. Take up more space somewhere else. I folded it and tucked it into my wallet. The condo was small, but it was mine, one bedroom. A cozy kitchen with black and white tile. Sunlight that hit the couch just right at noon. The realtor had shown it to me quietly after our second open house. I'd used my expected equity to put in an offer, and the seller had accepted no cosigners. No shared rooms. No asking permission. The keys felt heavy in my hand, not because of their weight, but because of what they meant. I walked into the space, set down a box of books, and breathed. It didn't smell like baby powder or mildew. It smelled like paint, and possibility. Closing day arrived with no fanfare. Not for them. Anyway, Melanie scheduled the final walkthrough for 9 a.m. Thyers pulled into the driveway in a silver sedan, and waving from the passenger seat, Frank opened the trunk. Already ready to unload, the front door clicked open under Melanie's key. My parents weren't home. Madison had taken them to a family brunch across town. I'd suggested it days earlier and even offered to cover the tab, an act so out of character that they didn't question it. By the time they returned, the house would no longer be as it never had been. I left one final note on the kitchen counter, next to the vase of fake sunflowers Madison insisted brightened the room. It read, "The baby deserves a better house," so I gave it to someone who would actually appreciate it. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. As I pulled out of the driveway, I passed my family's car turning onto the street. They didn't recognize my new vehicle. They didn't recognize me, the girl behind the wheel. Windows rolled down, hair dancing in the wind, music turned up just a little too loud, but I saw them. I saw the confusion as they slowed down, realizing someone else's car now sat in their driveway, and I didn't stop driving. I asked them all to meet in the living room. On a Sunday afternoon, no one asked why. Mom muttered something about not having time for another one of Ava's moods. Dad flipped through the sports section and nodded without looking up. Madison sat on the arm of the couch, scrolling endlessly on her phone. Legs crossed and belly resting lightly beneath her oversized hoodie. I stood in the doorway, calm and still, holding the black folder Melanie had given me the day before. It was thick with signatures, stamps, and finality. No one noticed. "Not yet, you gave my room away." I began. No one responded. I walked forward and placed the folder on the coffee table, sliding it across the wood until it bumped against Madison's water bottle. "So I gave the house away." For a second, the world didn't move. Mom stopped folding a baby blanket midair. Dad lowered the newspaper by 2 inches. Madison blinked slowly, as if trying to translate the sentence into something that made sense. "What are you talking about?" Mom asked. I opened the folder to the deed transfer page, the bold font spelling out the new owners' names, Frank and N. Delaney. "Congratulations," I said softly. "You'll be handing over the keys next Friday. Is this a joke?" Dad asked. Voice low, uncertain. Madison scoffed. "This isn't funny, Ava." "It's not a joke. The house was in my name. Has been for over 2 years." I pointed to the paperwork. "I refinanced it during Dad's layoff, got us a better rate. Remember when you were behind on payments? I saved us from foreclosure." Mom looked pale. "That's not possible." "Your father didn't qualify," I interrupted. "Neither did you, but I did. You both signed off on it. You just didn't bother remembering." Silence. Then Madison's voice pierced the air like a siren. "You're evicting a pregnant woman?" I turned to her slowly. "You evicted me." First, her mouth opened, but no words came. "You took my room. You threw out my belongings. You dumped my art in a bin like it was garbage. And you didn't ask, not once. You treated me like background noise. So I faded out." Dad finally stood, his hands shaking slightly. "Ava, this is our home." "No," I said, looking him in the eyes. "It was mine. On paper, in court, and in every sleepless night I spent making sure we didn't lose it. And instead of remembering that you let her," I nodded toward Madison, "decide that I was disposable." Tears began to pool in Mom's eyes. "But the baby." I softened for a moment. Just a moment. "The baby deserves a better family. One that doesn't push people out for convenience. One that doesn't treat love as transactional." Madison stood now, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "You're unbelievable. What kind of person does this? The kind you didn't think was worth a room. For a long moment, no one said anything. The only sound was the soft buzz of the heater in the corner. The same kind they told me to use in the garage. I turned toward the front door. Folder in hand, I left the garage untouched, I said. You
Can keep it, maybe make it the nursery you all wanted.
I stopped at the threshold and looked over my shoulder. For what it's worth, I don't hate any of you. But I needed to remind myself I wasn't someone you could keep in storage. Then I left. I didn't wait for their responses. I didn't need to. They'd said everything they needed to say when they told me there wasn't room. Now they had all the space they wanted, and none of the house. The silence in my new condo was the first thing I noticed, not the echo of an empty hallway, not the hum of traffic outside, just silence. A kind of stillness that didn't feel empty but clean. Like air after a storm. My first night there, I slept for 10 uninterrupted hours, wrapped in the kind of quiet that didn't need apology. There were no crying babies, no stomping footsteps, no sideways comments echoing through thin walls. Just me, a sturdy lock, and the knowledge that every inch of this space, every creak in the floor, every scuff on the baseboards, belonged to May. Bought 3 small succulents at the corner market the next day. I didn't name them, but I lined them up neatly. Along the kitchen windowsill, where the sunlight hit at noon, I made coffee slowly. Without someone reminding me that the good mugs were for guests, I unpacked my books in silence. I hung up one of my old paintings, the one Madison once called a little weird, right above the entry table, and it felt like hanging up a version of myself I'd nearly forgotten by the end of the week. I'd landed a remote design contract with a startup in Portland. Nothing huge, but steady. Enough to breathe. My laptop sat open on the breakfast counter, stylus in hand, as I sketched logos and email headers in warm, inviting colors. A client commented on how emotionally intelligent the work felt. I smiled at the screen for a long moment. Maybe there's something about being invisible that teaches you how to see deeper than most. One afternoon, as I was folding a blanket over the arm of the couch, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from my younger cousin, Lena, 17. Dramatic, and the only one in the family who ever asked me how I really was. Dude, you're kind of a legend right now. Grandma just called Mom, sobbing about the great betrayal. Madison's crying on Facebook. Even Uncle Rob's impressed. Also, low-key proud of you. No one's ever stood up to them like that. I laughed, actually laughed, from my gut. It startled even. Nate texted back, didn't mean to be a legend. Just wanted a door that locked. And a heater that didn't click every 10 seconds. She replied with 3 fire emojis and a gif of Beyoncé walking away from an explosion. I sat on the couch for a while after that, feet curled beneath me, the city skyline glowing faintly outside my window for the first time in a long time. I didn't feel like a visitor in my own life. I thought about all the times I'd folded myself small, to fit in, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. I thought about love, the kind I kept begging for, the kind I thought I had to earn by being quiet, helpful, agreeable, but the truth was simpler and sharper. If they only loved me when I disappeared, then it was never love at all. Didn't hate them, I didn't wish them pain, but I did wish they finally saw the space I left behind, and the weight of everything I had carried, in silence. For far too long that night, I lit a candle in my new bathroom. I played soft jazz on my phone while brushing my teeth. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and felt real, like someone who had finally stopped waiting for permission. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their explanations, and I certainly didn't need their keys, because some doors you walk through quietly and never return. The condo wasn't big, but it was enough space to breathe. Enough light to feel warm. Enough quiet to finally hear myself think, and more than enough to host the kind of dinner I never got to have back in that old house, the kind where no one interrupts you mid-sentence or rolls their eyes when you talk about art. 3 friends came. Tasha, of course, with a bottle of wine and a dish she half burned and still insisted was charred on purpose. Leah, my college roommate, who laughed so hard she cried at everything, and Eli, a friend from the design forum, who brought a playlist and cookies from a local bakery. No one was related by blood, but the room felt like home. We ate around my small round table, legs brushing under the soft flicker of string lights I'd hung earlier that week. Laughter bounced off the walls like music. No tension, no judgment. No one checking their watch, waiting for me to leave at one point. Leah looked around and said, "Seriously, Ava, this place is perfect. How'd you even find it?" I sipped from my glass and shrugged. "A baby needed my room," I said. They all blinked. Then Tasha grinned. "You're going to have to explain that sometime." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'll just let the plaque do the talking." The next morning, I opened the small package that had arrived the day before. A brass door plaque. Matte finish. Simple Fonteva L. Mitchell Suite 2B. I held it in my hands for a long time before walking to the front door. The hallway was quiet, filled with the scent of someone's fresh coffee. I peeled off the adhesive strip and pressed the plaque firmly into place. Right next to the doorbell, the name gleamed softly in the morning light. My name on my door. I stepped back, hands on my hips, and breathed in deep. There was no applause, no confetti, no cinematic swelling music, just a woman, a brass plate, and a quiet knowing in her bones. This space was earned, this name had weight, this home had no expiration. I thought about them. My family, once or twice in the days that followed. I imagined the moment they walked back into the house and realized it was no longer there. I wondered if they looked for me, if they sat in the empty kitchen and asked, "How did we lose her?" Or if they still blamed me for leaving instead of asking what made me go. But the thing is, I didn't leave. I chose peace over proximity, dignity over obligation, self-worth over silence. They gave my room away like it meant nothing, so I gave away the house because I finally remembered what I was worth. If you've ever been treated like you didn't matter, I hope this story reminded you. You do if it moved you. Please leave a comment. Maybe you've had a room taken from you too. Or maybe, like me, you finally found your own door. Don't forget to subscribe, and share this with someone who needs a quiet victory today, because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away with your name still shining.